What would have happened if in 1939 Germany had handed Slovakia to Poland in exchange for Gdansk and a corridor? Would this have stopped World War II? And if so, what exactly would have changed? Let me answer this question in this video. First, it is worth noting that the idea of handing over Gdansk for Slovakia exists solely in the game Hearts of Iron 4. In fact, such a proposal was never considered in our history, making this scenario highly unlikely. Germany aimed to capture all of Poland, not to exchange lands. Moreover, Poland would have to give up access to the sea to gain Slovakia, which is also unlikely. Considering these caveats, let's examine this unrealistic scenario, as it might turn out to be quite interesting. Another caveat: Gdansk was not actually a Polish city. It was an independent state under the influence of Poland and the League of Nations, with most of its population being Germans who wanted to join Germany. The Polish party received only 6% of the votes. Later, this percentage dropped to 3%. Nevertheless, under the conditions of the Versailles Treaty, Poland was granted certain privileges in Gdansk, including the right to use the port as its own. This is really important, as Poland knew it could ultimately lose Gdansk. Therefore, immediately after the Polish-Soviet War, they began construction of a new port in Gdansk, located in the Polish corridor, in case they ever lost Gdansk. This information will become significant later in the video. So does it make sense to exchange Gdansk for Slovakia? When I mention Gdansk, I mainly refer to the free city of Gdansk, but Germany also wanted to obtain the Gdansk corridor, which covered approximately these lands. Slovakia is significantly larger than Gdansk in the corridor, with a population of 2.5 million, while Gdansk has only 400,000. It can be said that Slovakia is clearly more valuable than Gdansk, and this exchange seems logical. Suppose Germany captured Slovakia, violating the Munich Agreement, and established a puppet state there, granting partial independence to Slovakia. Germany could control the Slavic lands while Poland would predominantly control the German free city of Gdansk. Thus, on paper, the exchange of Slovakia for Gdansk would seem reasonable. However, Poland would likely reject this proposal without a second thought. Even if such an offer were made by Germany, Poland would probably decline it. Returning to our story, it can be said that this scenario is extremely unlikely, both from the perspective that Germany could make such a proposal and from the perspective that Poland could accept it. To understand why Poland might refuse this or what Germany's true intentions were, let's look at the historical ultimatum that Germany sent to Poland on the 29th. In August 1939, 3 days before the start of World War II, Germany did not actually present an ultimatum to Poland. They only pretended that it happened and that Poland had rejected it. It is interesting since Britain betrayed Poland, not informing Polish representatives about the need to go to Berlin, not accepting Germany's demands, and wanting Poland to fight. Great Britain informed Poland of the ultimatum only after the deadline had passed, leading to the resignation of Polish ambassador Joseph Lipski when he read the 16 points of the ultimatum but refused to deliver the relevant document, as no Polish representative arrived on time, mainly because Great Britain did not inform Poland as soon as possible. In any case, Poland would have rejected the ultimatum, even if it had been delivered, as leaks of conversations between them and Britain revealed that the ultimatum consisted of 16 points. I would like to list the most important of them. Moreover, Germany added to the ultimatum that Poland would receive Slovakia if it accepted the first point, which stated that the free city of Danzig would return to Germany without a referendum. Then Germany proposed to hold a plebiscite under the control of the great powers in some cities within the Polish corridor, regarding whether they should join Germany or remain in Poland. Germany would almost win all these territories, as it would allow the local Germans who were expelled to return and vote. If the territory decides for some reason to remain in Poland under the German ultimatum, there was a provision linking B with Danzig or Dissa by a narrow strip of land for the construction of a highway and a 4-track railway. I quote, "This zone will be 1 kilometer wide and will become German territory." So it could work like this. The same rights that Poland had in the port of Danzig would also be transferred to Germany, allowing Germany to use the Polish port of Gdansk as its own, thus effectively becoming a joint zone. Moreover, both port cities were to be demilitarized. Regardless of the results of the referendum, a referendum was also to be held on the Hel Peninsula, which would also become demilitarized regardless of the outcomes. Another interesting point in this ultimatum was that both countries were to cooperate in the apprehension of criminals and the protection of international law. Essentially, if a German committed a crime in Poland, the Germans would theoretically arrest that person and hand them over to the Polish government, Later, you will understand why this is so important. The last interesting point in the ultimatum was that both countries had to immediately demobilize their armed forces to reduce tension. Remember that this ultimatum was to be delivered 3 days before the start of World War II, so both countries were ready for battle at that moment. You can look at the ultimatum and say that all its points are reasonable. It seems that the Germans are indeed striving for a peaceful solution, but one must not forget that this statement was made by internationalists who wanted war, and literally intended to erase the Polish people from the face of the earth, colonizing this region. That is why the ultimatum could be phrased in such a way that it would be rejected. In fact, Poland gains nothing from this. It had to allow a referendum in certain areas, and at best, lose Danzig. Germany, in turn, is building its Autobahn and cutting off Jew from the rest of continental Europe. Historically, when the ultimatum failed, Germany had no strong grounds for war, so the day before World War II began, German soldiers, disguised in Polish uniforms, attacked a German radio station, and the Germans pretended that Poland had attacked them first. Then the real story begins. But what if Poland had accepted this ultimatum and received Slovakia in return? Surely, exchanging red lands for green would be profitable. In this unrealistic scenario, Poland accepts an ultimatum, raising the question of whether World War II will even happen and what it will look like. The problem is that Germany could not actually give Slovakia to Poland in August 1939. Slovakia had been an independent country for about a year, heavily leaning towards the Axis. This meant that when Germany fully annexed Czechoslovakia and violated the Munich Agreement, they had to annex the whole country, which would be a serious blow to their political legitimacy. This time, they could not even imagine themselves as liberators of the Slovak people. Thus, the annexation of Czechoslovakia would be extremely undesirable and create many problems. This is yet another argument for why this scenario is actually very unrealistic. The most logical solution for the Germans would have been to do as they did in real history, namely to establish a puppet state in Slovakia. However, this would not fit our video, as Germany would then not be able to exchange Slovakia for Danzig. In this alternate scenario, Germany would have directly controlled Slovakia, allowing them to transfer it to Poland, unlike in our history. Speaking of Slovakia, I want to show 2 coins, both from the year 1941, when the first Slovak Republic existed. The second coin is even more interesting, as it contains 15 grams of silver, with a 49% purity. Slovakia was briefly independent during World War II, as it was part of Czechoslovakia before and after, making these coins quite rare. I hope you find them interesting. If you want me to show more coins in the future, please like. I want to note that if we were considering a realistic scenario, essentially, nothing interesting would have happened. Germany would have initiated the Gleiwitz incident anyway, and according to the ultimatum to Poland, they would have been legally allowed to enter Poland to investigate who did it. Germany would have conquered Poland a bit easier than in our history, but the invasion would have ended around the same time as in reality, so overall nothing would have changed in the course of the war or the peace treaties. This is your realistic answer, so in the scenario where it is replaced by Slovakia, essentially, nothing changes. Now I want to present my point of view, where I sacrifice some realism for a truly interesting scenario in this unrealistic alternative history. The ultimatum will be delivered on time and accepted on August 29th, 1939. However, the fact is that just a week before this, Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which envisaged the division of Eastern Europe between the two sides. This suggests that Germany is unlikely to hold on to its conquests and will not start World War II, although the situation will look somewhat different than in our reality. This is mainly related to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which will likely be slightly altered, as it was originally intended for the Soviet Union to take most of Poland and Germany to take Lithuania, but that did not happen, and the pact was adjusted according to Germany's needs. As for Poland, very few in the country would support exchanging Danzig for Slovakia, so while it would prevent war, it would diminish Polish unity, and many would begin to protest against their government's decision. The Slovaks would also take advantage of the situation and rise up, trying to secure their independence from a weakened opponent, as separation from Poland rather than Germany seemed more likely. Therefore, I expect Slovakia to start a guerrilla war in the mountains, which would further weaken Poland. I also assume that ideological uprisings will occur in Poland, possibly involving communists and peasants attempting to seize power through armed revolution. The rise to power of the communists in Poland after this humiliating treaty is quite possible, as Poland is likely to radicalize. They were already under totalitarian military rule, which would quickly become unpopular due to the signing of this humiliating treaty.
Поскольку Польша также будет радикализирована и будет бояться дальнейшей германской экспансии, она, скорее всего, начнет искать защиту у Советского Союза, а не полагаться на своих нынешних союзников– Францию и Великобританию.
In general, the totalitarian military regime will become unpopular, and the people will begin to reject the April Constitution. For the Poles striving for internationalism and an alliance with the Germans, it will be impossible to realize their intentions, so the only totalitarian ideology that Poland could adopt would be communism. This is why I believe Poland will gradually shift towards communism. Communism was quite popular in Poland. When the elections were relatively free in 1938, all socialist and leftist parties received about a quarter of the votes. The dictatorship was well established, so they would be accused of conceding Poland to the Germans in exchange for suppressing the rebels in the south, historically yielding nothing valuable. Practically all the opposition boycotted the elections, as the April Constitution greatly favored the ruling movement. This time, I believe there may be early elections, and the opposition could take advantage of this opportunity to gain strong positions. The central left bloc was a coalition of political parties in the 30s, which translates to center-right, and this political coalition can be revived to take advantage of the situation. Moreover, the minorities of Poland will likely join this opposition and unite with the central left. The reason for this is that the current Polish government has just ceded ethnic German lands to Germany, so Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Slovaks may fear that this incompetent government will betray them and sign their fate in an alliance with the Soviet Union or Hungary. Certainly, some minorities would like to join the Soviet Union, but the central left bloc would strive for cooperation with the Soviet Union both politically and economically. Thus, Poland does not need to cede more territories to remain independent. One could say that I would suppose if the Polish government made such a mistake as conceding Danzig to Slovakia, then Poland would likely become socialist and unite with the Soviet Union. Poland was practically left without support from France and Britain, while Germany and Italy were not friendly to the Poles, so Poland could only turn to one great European power, the Soviet Union. Germany is unlikely to immediately invade Poland after the ultimatum. For now, Germany will probably watch the political situation in Poland develop and, ironically, assist the Polish nationalist government, as Germany understands this will only weaken the Polish nation and keep them away from cooperating with the Soviet Union. The fact is that Germany will be less effective, while France and Britain are still obliged to defend Poland in the event of an invasion by a European power, which effectively means Germany. The Soviet Union will invest resources and capital in Poland, and as I predicted, Poland will become socialist, likely under the leadership of Edward Tupa-Morawa, who historically led the Polish Socialist Party. A single-party state was expected to be established. Thus, if Germany invaded Poland, they would have to worry not only about France and Britain, but also about the Soviet Union, which meant that World War II would start a little later. But with crazy ultra-nationalists in power, it would be impossible to prevent it. Germany will believe in the inferiority of Slavic peoples and communist ideology, so the conflict between Poland and the Soviet Union seems quite likely to me in the year 1940. I assume this alternative World War II will look similar to ours. Considering some important changes, the Soviet Union enters the war with Germany almost a year earlier, which will negatively affect its outcomes. At the same time, a revolution and Slovak uprising are occurring in Poland, making the country extremely unstable. I expect that Germany will send 80% of its army to the Eastern Front, while the rest will hold positions against France and Britain, similar to our history. France will capture Saar, but will be too stubborn to advance further, thus retreating behind the defensive line. I believe that Poland will be quickly captured, and possibly Hungary will join this offensive, as they are promised almost all of Slovakia. Germany has betrayed Slovak interests, conceding them to Poland in exchange for Danzig, so it will not be able to establish a puppet state in Slovakia. Thus, the transfer of Slovakia to Hungary seems quite likely. The Soviet Union during this period is not in the best shape for war, as this presumably occurs in the middle of the year 1940. Notably, Germany did not invade Poland in September 1939, and the Winter War between the Soviet Union and Finland did not begin. Therefore, Finland is unlikely to join the Axis, as there will be no continuation of the war. This will have several consequences, as the siege of Leningrad may be less effective without Finland's involvement in the conflict. I expect the Soviet Union to start losing ground, especially considering that Lithuania will also join the Axis. Germany promises the Lithuanians what they have long desired, namely the restoration of the borders of the Lithuanian Kingdom of 1918 at the expense of other Polish territories. Latvia and Estonia, ironically, will be liberated, as the Soviet Union will not be able to occupy them as it did in history, and Germany will gain nothing from their invasion. I believe that Latvia and Estonia will become something like Sweden in our history. They will only trade with the Axis and may allow Axis troops to pass through their territory. Germany will not have to occupy them, as these countries are already effectively puppet states of the Axis.